Hello there, you're watching the nightly news program live on All 24 News Channel from Algiers. Next are today's top stories. Algerian president chairs cabinet meeting devoted to many sectors of endeavor, including limiting major risks and civil and administrative procedures law. Also coming up, Algerian energy giant Sonatrach is set to build $1.5 billion petrochemical complex in Arzew, Oran province. Also ahead, in Sudan, clashes resume with heavy artillery after ceasefire between warring parties ended. And Kiev announces new gains, while Moscow says it repelled several attacks. Hello again and welcome to the program. First off in our news, President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, chaired on Sunday a cabinet meeting which was devoted to two draft laws. The first includes the rules of prevention, intervention, and limiting major risks. And the second is pertaining to the civil and administrative procedures law. In addition to presentations including the draft law on forgery and the use of counterfeiters, the supplementary program for the state of Jelfa province, and the re-evaluation of the compensatory system for workers in the southern states were also discussed. Algerian energy giant Sonatrach signed on Sunday a $1.5 billion contract for the construction of a petrochemical complex in the industrial zone of Arzew. The complex will have a production capacity of 550,000 tons per year of polypropylene. Zara Frajani with the details.
Algerian Sonatrach Energy Complex is planning to build a new petrochemical industry construction over an area of 88 hectares with an investment value of $1.5 billion. On Sunday, Step Polymers SPA, Sonatrach subsidiary, and the Sino-British joint venture Petrofac HQC signed the complex construction contract.
Today, the construction, supply and engineering contract was signed with Petrofac and the Chinese company HQC. We have great hope for our partners to complete this project within the specified period because it's an important project for Sonatrach and strategic one for the country.
We will shortly have the pleasure of signing an important contract with Step Polymers SPA. This is particularly important to Petrofac as we develop our breadth of experience within the petrochemical sector and build on our long track record in this region.
This project would allow the production of more than 500,000 tons of polypropylene annually, the largest share of which would be directed to cover the needs of the Algerian market, while the surplus would be exported.
This project will allow the export of surplus production in order to increase our non-hydrocarbon exports. It will contribute to the provision of direct job positions estimated at 750,000 and also 500 job positions from the local labor force during the various stages of the implementation of this project.
The energy giant Sonatrach preferred to use the internal financial market, so it chose the National Bank of Algeria as a lead bank, which will cover 70% of the value of this project, while Sonatrach will finance the remaining 30% from its own resources.
70% of the cost of the project will be provided by a group of several national banks led by the National Bank of Algeria.
The Algerian oil and gas company Sonatrach is expanding its investments in derivatives projects to cope and keep up with Algeria's current economic dynamism, contributing to achieving self-sufficiency in strategic polypropylene and strengthening the Algerian energy group's exports.
And in the same context and regarding the withdrawal of the French Total Group from the project, the CEO of Sonatrach confirmed that the decision is sovereign and subject to a strategy of the French group, and this will not affect the partnership between the two groups.
At the end of these studies, as well as after the financial offer for this project, there was a certain amount of $1.5 billion. The parties met in order to take the final investment decision, which is up to the accounts of each company. The company Total saw that perhaps this project does not correspond to what was expected. They took their decision independently, and we independently continue this project.
To a different story now, Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune honored the Algerian team, USM Algiers, after their victory of the African Confederation Cup for the first time in history. This was in the presence of prominent political and sports figures. The occasion provided an opportunity for the USM Algiers team to present the Algerian president with a shirt bearing his name, signed by the team players.
We are thrilled, first of winning the Cup of African Confederation and the second with this honorary ceremony. We thank the President for receiving us. We share our joy with all the Algerian people.
It's a great honor for us because the President received the USM Algiers team. The honoring ceremony was very beautiful, and this motivates the players to make special efforts in the field, whether locally or continentally.
The Libyan Presidential Council on Saturday expressed its readiness for extended consultation with all national forces and institutions concerned with the participation of the UN mission to ensure the continuation of the current stability and prepare the atmosphere for elections in the country. For her part, Presidential Council spokeswoman Najwa Wahiba said in a statement to the official Libyan news agency, the Council clearly welcomed the results reached by the 6+6 committee after its meeting that took place in Morocco and looks forward to the House of Representatives issuing the electoral laws in their final form. The European Union is considering over €1 billion in aid for Tunisia, and according to the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, the help consists of developing the Northern African country's battered economy, rescue state finances, and cooperate on migration and border issues were top on the agenda. More with Salman Asid.
European leaders on Sunday visiting Tunisia held up the promise of more than €1 billion in financial aid as well as investments in undersea data cables and renewable energy in an effort to restore stability in the Northern African country and to stem migration from its shores to Europe. The major package aid was considered during the meeting, hosted by Tunisia's President Kais Saied, with EU Commission President von der Leyen, who was accompanied by Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, whose country is the main arrival point for migrants crossing the Mediterranean from Tunisia.
The first pillar is economic development. We will support Tunisia to strengthen its economy. The European Commission is considering macrofinancial assistance as soon as the necessary agreement is found. And we are ready to mobilize up to €900 million for this purpose of macrofinancial assistance.
For her part, the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, who was already in Tunisia earlier this week, met with President Kais Saied on Tuesday to lay the groundwork for an agreement with the EU, which she hoped would pave the way for a bailout with the International Monetary Fund.
We are ready to host an international conference on migration and development in Rome that we talked about with President Saied as a further step in this journey that we have undertaken together. And of course, we consider this work useful also to help Tunisia in its negotiations with the IFM.
The EU, like other major donors to Tunisia, has so far conditioned its support on the country, finalizing a loan program with the International Monetary Fund. But President Kais Saied has rejected key reforms required by the plan and said his country would not play the role of border guard for Europe after he made an unannounced visit to a migrant camp in the coastal city of Sfax on Saturday.
I'm not talking about countries, but there are cases related to human trafficking and organ trafficking, and there are networks behind this phenomenon that has been unknown to Tunisia for years. Of course, migrants are victims of poverty and civil wars, and of the absence of the state in many regions. They fled to Tunisia as a refugee. But we're also a country that has its own laws, a country that respects laws and respects the human being.
Many Tunisians are already suffering economic hardships. As a result, more and more Tunisians themselves risk dangerous boat journeys across the Mediterranean to seek a better life in Europe. This is weighing heavy on Tunisian authorities' shoulders, and such aid package can indeed better the situation for the North African nation.
In Africa still, Somali joint forces managed to eliminate 19 terrorists from Al-Shabaab movement associated with Al-Qaeda, including the destruction of mechanisms and weapons used by terrorists in Lower Shabaab region. And according to the Somali news agency, the joint operation is underway, executed by the Somali Security and Intelligence Service forces in the village of Bula Muhammad Abdullah, which is located at the borders of the Outegli district. 10 minutes after the end of the agreed ceasefire, which started on Saturday and was meant to end at 6, residents of the Sudanese capital Khartoum and its neighboring cities have reported that the warring parties in the country had effectively resumed fighting and confrontations. Sudan's army and the rapid support forces used heavy artillery, warplanes and anti-aircraft weapons in a sign of escalated clashes in the country. More with Usama Ayadi.
After the latest 24-hour ceasefire agreement between the Sudanese army and the rapid support forces expired, clashes and gunfire resumed on Sunday in the greater capital area of Sudan, which is composed of the capital Khartoum and neighboring cities of North Khartoum and Omdurman. This is one of the most affected areas by the ongoing armed clashes between the two sides since the start of the war in mid-April. Witnesses reported that around 10 minutes after the end of the truce, both sides used artillery and other heavy weapons. The Sudanese armed forces deployed warplanes, while the rapid support forces responded with anti-aircraft guns.
Our medical supplies are mainly donated by humanitarian organizations and groups. Some organizations provide supplies while others provide transportation support. But to be frank, these supplies are far from enough to sustain us for a week.
According to the Sudanese Doctors Union, the deadly armed clashes since April 15 have left at least 863 people dead and over 3,500 others injured. Egypt, for its part, has imposed an entry visa on Sudanese refugees, for many of them have been arrested for illegal activities, while the flow of refugees is still on the rise in other neighboring countries. The war has also left healthcare system and infrastructure entirely deteriorated, especially that the rapid support forces declared their control over many hospitals.
I haven't received dialysis for 10 days now, and it makes me painful and exhausted. I can't get treatment. If an aspirin is not available in the hospital, I have to find other ways to buy it. But sometimes I can't even find gauze and syringes.
As a different initiative to find solutions for a permanent ceasefire and eventually peace to be restored, neighboring countries including South Sudan and Djibouti have gathered in a trilateral summit for discussion over the war in Sudan. Awaiting the outcomes of this gathering, people in Sudan remain under threats of death, looking for the least hope for a lasting peace.
And in other topical development, Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei confirmed on Sunday that Iran does not mind signing an agreement on its nuclear program with the West, provided that the infrastructure of the nuclear activities is not affected. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister of the Zionist entity, Benjamin Netanyahu, warned that any settlement reached with Tehran would not be binding on the entity.
Iran's nuclear deal with the West is showing positive signs of the stalemate between Tehran and Washington to revive a 2015 nuclear pact. During a meeting with the country's nuclear scientists and officials, Iran's supreme leader said that a deal with the West over the nuclear work was possible if the country's nuclear infrastructure remained intact.
You may want to come to agreements in some areas. This is no problem. Make an agreement, but the infrastructure must be maintained.
Khamenei remarks come days following Tehran and Washington denial over reports that both countries were nearing an interim deal under which Tehran would curb its nuclear program in return of lifting sanctions. Iran has long denied ever seeking nuclear weapons and continues to insist that its nuclear program is entirely for peaceful purposes.
We don't want to go towards nuclear weapons based on Islam. If we wanted to go, they could not stop us as they have been unable to stop our nuclear developments until now and will not be able to stop them.
Meanwhile, the Zionist Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated to the U.S. Secretary Antony Blinken his government's opposition to a nuclear deal with Iran, accusing the latter of seeking to develop a nuclear bomb, a charge which Iran denies. It's worth mentioning that the Zionist entity is the biggest enemy of Iran, since the latter rejects its presence in the region altogether. The Zionists, meanwhile, are trying to strengthen their presence by attempting to normalize all its relations with the Middle East countries.
At least 3 soldiers and 3 militants were killed in an exchange of fire between the Pakistani army and militants who attacked a security checkpoint in northwest Pakistan. In a statement on Sunday, the Pakistani army said that 3 soldiers were killed during a gunfight with terrorists in North Waziristan district of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa state. The statement added that the special forces clashed with terrorists, killing 3 terrorists and wounding 4 others. Montenegro's Europe Now movement won 25.6% of votes in snap election on Sunday. The Center for Monitoring and Research pollster said on the basis of projection of results from a sample of polling stations. The PS, which has pro-European Union policies and also wants closer ties with neighboring Serbia, failed to secure enough votes to rule alone, and it will have to seek partners in the 81-seat parliament to form the government. To the latest development on Russia-Ukraine file now, Kiev announced on Sunday that Ukrainian forces have retaken 3 villages in Donetsk region, while Moscow says it repelled several attacks by Ukraine, including one on a warship in the Black Sea. More details with Sofian Kinturi.
The Russia-Ukraine war continues to back the tides after Kiev announced the launch of its large-scale counteroffensive. Kiev says Ukrainian forces intensified their counteroffensive over the weekend, claiming to have breached Russia's defenses and liberated at least 3 villages in the southeast of the Donetsk region. Kiev has long been reluctant to admit that the counteroffensive has started, but on Saturday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that the counteroffensive and respective defensive actions are underway. Moscow did not immediately comment on the claims, but on Saturday, the Russian Defense Ministry said Ukraine had yet to break through its defensive lines and claimed to have destroyed some of Kiev's advanced Western-manufactured weaponry. According to the Russian military command, Russian air defense systems also managed to repel all Ukrainian counterattacks, inflicting heavy losses on the Ukrainian side.
Over the past 24 hours, the Ukrainian armed forces continued unsuccessful attempts to conduct offensive operations in the South Donetsk and Zaporizhia directions, as well as near the city of Artemivsk. Toward this point, the Ukrainian leadership headed when the commander of the operations in the east of the country appeared on the international public opinion and confirmed the return of Ukrainian forces' control over 2 towns north of Bakhmut, taking advantage of the Wagner Group's exit from the most prominent city in the war.
With all responsibility, I have been authorized to declare the liberation of Blahodetny village. It lies under Velika Novoselka. This was done by fighters of the 68th Gyre Separate Brigade, Alexei Dovbush. The operation was successful, in cooperation with nearby units of the defense forces in the Torsk direction.
Elsewhere, Russia said on Sunday that Ukraine had made an unsuccessful attempt to attack a Russian naval ship with 6 high-speed trawling boats as the Russian vessel patrolled major natural gas pipelines in the Black Sea.
Today, at about 1:30 Moscow time, the armed forces of Ukraine made an unsuccessful attempt to attack the Black Sea Fleet's ship, which is performing the tasks of monitoring the situation and ensuring security along the routes of Turkish Stream and Blue Stream gas pipelines in the southeastern part of the Black Sea.
Meanwhile, Russia appears to have moved to take direct control of Wagner, after months of infighting between defense officials and the private military group. The private military group has played a major role in the war in Ukraine, fighting on the side of Russian forces. Any disagreement could have indeed a serious change in the tides of the war.
Russia's most powerful military group said on Sunday that his Wagner Group soldiers are not going to sign any contract soon.
Wagner Group will not sign any contracts with Shoigu. Wagner is originally built into the overall system. The Wagner coordinates its actions with generals on the right, left, with unit commanders. It has deepest experience and is a highly effective structure. Fortunately, most military units do not have such efficiency, and precisely because Shoigu cannot manage military formations as well.
Swedish police said a 15-year-old boy was killed and 3 others were injured by gunfire in Stockholm. But the circumstances of the incident were unclear following a short chase in the south of the Swedish capital. 2 men were apprehended an hour later. There were 2 more people nearby, one of whom died as a result of his injuries. All the way to the United States now, supporters of former U.S. President Donald Trump were reported driving in caravan from Miami to Palm Beach and rallying in favor of the indicted ex-president. The rallies have coincided with the former president's birthday as the protesters have chanted in favor for him, expressing wishes for his return as President of the United States.
I love him because I know he's a good president. He was a good president. Now is my president. Now, tomorrow, and forever. And I defend him. I'm going to see you, my president, again. The Lord is with you, and He sent you here for something. And that something is you are the president.
It's a bunch of, I don't want to say it, but you know what? It's just a witch hunt. It's a BS. It's a, they try to. Why they're doing it now? It's a trick that they don't want him to win because they're afraid. The Democrats and the Liberals, they are afraid.
Canada is witnessing its worst ever start of wildfire season, with blazes ravaging much of the country and creating hazardous smoke conditions. Canada's wildfire service showed in its footage wildfires burning around 10 kilometers east of Tumbler Ridge in British Columbia and blanketing skies with dark smoke, with the area affected estimated to be around 9,600 hectares. The same service stated that this increase in fire activity was expected with stronger winds forecasts, which in turn would restrict firefighting efforts. Local authorities issued an evacuation order for the town of Tumbler Ridge as the smoke from the wildfires in Canada traveled into the United States, blanketing capital Washington, D.C. in an unhealthy haze.
Aujourd'hui, c'est la dernière journée où réellement on va être dans le...
Today is the last day that we're really going to be preparing. Today has really been devoted to exchanging information, passing it on, and operational preparation, so that from tomorrow onwards, we can finally take action on the fires. This preparation was essential, indispensable, and unavoidable. And that's why we haven't been able to go out into the field until now, because we had to carry all this information with us. Safety information, information about the equipment to be used in the best possible way from tomorrow morning.
Honduras opened an embassy in Beijing on Sunday, according to the latest reports by a Chinese media report. The embassy in Beijing was opened by China's Foreign Minister Qin Gang and Honduran Foreign Minister Eduardo Enrique Reina. Honduras is the 182nd country to establish diplomatic relations with China. It's worth noting that China, on its part, officially inaugurated its embassy in Honduras last Monday.
President Castro hopes that this relationship, this openness based on the principle of respect for sovereignty, dignity, with a country with such a strong push in the world, such as China, will bring us many benefits, especially for Honduran people, and that this relationship will result in very important projects.
We reached the end of our program. For more, you can always visit our social media platforms as well as our website. That's the end for me and the rest of the English team. Thank you for watching. Take care for now.